Hi guys, we're finally heading towards the final round of Super Rugby before the playoffs, but just before we get into that discussion, Ryan, we've just been chatting a bit about Jake White's column on All Out Rugby, and I thought there were some interesting points there. He mentioned how we perhaps value tradition in our rugby in South Africa, and made mention of a couple of things that really kind of got me thinking. He spoke of how Percy Montgomery, Osterrand, legends of the game, once they'd retired, they were involved for a brief period with the national team in a coaching capacity before kind of being put out to pasture. It's got me thinking a point that I've always maintained is we often speak of when players go overseas, whether we're just losing their on-field ability, but also what about the intellectual capacity? A guy like Yannick du Plessis, he's gone abroad, so has Bismarck. And I saw with the Sharks how they mentor the youngsters, and we're losing that as well in terms of how they can help bring those players through. And specifically now, I look at Vrede, a retired legend, and I'm just wondering, why is he not being brought in to mentor some of the young number 9s at Springbok level? And Brian de Banner as well. He's just been here in Cape Town this morning doing a breakfast. I just think he would add so much value if Rassie brought him in a mentorship capacity, not necessarily as a coach, but just as a guy to spend some time in the camp during the Rugby Championship and to really mentor the young wingers that we've got in the team at the moment.
The issue that you raise is a critical one. So when you lose a player like, let's go with Yanni for example now. You're not only losing him to the franchise, but you're losing him for a player like Thomas Toy, and all of that stored knowledge, all of that experience, all of that technical ability that has been so critical in Yanni's own development throughout his career. So whoever came before him mentored him in that way. That's really been one of the great strengths of South African rugby, that there's been that baton passing sort of ceremony, for lack of a better phrase there, or baton passing process between an experienced player in the twilight of his career and this young buck coming up now. Bismarck would have experienced it with John Smith, even though they were competing at one stage in their career. But my understanding is that John was always gracious with his time and with his knowledge, and you can see it. The benefits are clear in a player like Bismarck. But the one big impact of the mass exodus of our elite senior players to play at foreign clubs is that process now falls flat. It's already having effects, and it's going to increasingly so. We're not going to stop players going abroad. If a big media publication offered either of us a sweet gig abroad and it would progress our careers, we'd look at it seriously, and rugby players are no different. So that process is not going to stop. But the question is, how do we prevent it from being terminal to the fortunes of South African rugby going forward? I think
just on that point is we often think of it as a very negative thing when a player goes overseas, but I think there's also an element of now starting to embrace it and go, they're going abroad, they're bettering themselves as players, and also learning a lot about, different ways of playing, different environments, different, teammates and competitions, and then to tap into that, when it gets to the point of perhaps them winding down. And I think specifically of a guy like Skalk Brits, 37 years old, suddenly brought back by Rassie Erasmus during the June test matches, and people might have questioned what's the point of bringing him back. But I was there in camp with the team, and you could see how much value he added just in terms of a mentor and a role model. He started working with the young hookers in the squad. He had so much to impart in terms of his knowledge from playing with the Saracens in England. He knew a lot about the England players. There was a massive aspect of tapping into his knowledge, as much as Rassie wanted him to also perhaps play a little bit of a role on the field and to see if he still had enough in his legs to go to the next World Cup. But it was very much just bringing him back to see what he could add as a mentor. And I think there was a great, tactical, intelligent move to do that.
Right, I agree, and there's opportunity to do that with many of the Springboks that still reside here, or former Boks that still reside here. You mentioned Vrede earlier on, and I was really privileged in the early part of my career to be assigned the Bulls as the team that I covered, because at the time they had assembled a collection of players that would go on to be some of the greatest in Springbok history. Vrede was chief among those, and even though he didn't like speaking to the media in a press conference forum, he was always open to his mind, his rugby mind being tapped by me. And over the years, you learn that, you understand that this, like the way he thinks about the game, the way he sees the game, is phenomenal. And his technical understanding of rugby is a game of cause and effect, right? So, and his ability to one, understand that, but then to manipulate the cause to get to the desired effect that he wants was, for me, second to none. And I don't understand why you wouldn't use somebody like that. The flip side of that is not every former player has that type of technical knowledge. So the key is to discern between the two. A player like Percy Montgomery, for me, for instance, who's one of the most iconic bocks ever, I wouldn't deploy him in a sort of a technical capacity like that. I don't think that's his strength. I think his presence is almost sufficient. One of Percy's big strengths is a one-on-one type scenario, where he's taking a young player. Let's use a Stormers example, because we're in Cape Town. So Craig Barry, for instance, a young player like that, and going, listen, Craig, this is what I was thinking in the situation. This is how I negotiated this particular challenge, and maybe to understand him on more of like a man-to-man type of level is where Percy would operate at his optimum, I think. So the discernment between what types of players, and so Vrede as this technical mastermind, and Percy, for instance, as more of with maybe having more emotional intelligence. And understanding those two different types of roles is critical. But fundamentally, what we're saying is that there's got to be a spot for these guys somewhere in our system. Because, I mean, Lord knows that we're not blessed with like a wealth of incredibly talented coaches. We had this discussion last week. That's my view, at least. So why not try to supplement what we lacked in that area by utilizing these guys?
Yeah, I think it's definitely very much about how we can best make use of our players who've gone abroad and come back, and a lot of them do, maybe finish their careers overseas, but they most often do wind up back here in South Africa. Yeah. But before we get too carried away with that discussion, let's move on to predictions. And again, I know you want to get stuck into me. I cannot pick the Sharks correctly, and we were chatting. I have no idea how they didn't beat the Stormers last weekend, but maybe it's because I picked them.
I have an idea, and it's because I told you so. So yeah, I just look. I never want to, I always want South African franchises to do well. But you also got to be realistic, and there's been a pattern with the Sharks, and this is what I said last week. I don't think they're a team that knows why they play well when they play well. So there's a difference between a team like the Jags, who you're going to nail me on in a second, who I think have a blueprint and are able to replicate that blueprint week in, week out, with an exception of their game against the Bulls now, obviously. But I think there were other factors involved there that we'll talk about in a second. But the Sharks, for me, are a tragedy, because a tactical tragedy, because they don't know how to replicate performance week in and week out. So at the moment, it's a collection of individuals, as I see it, a collection of individuals, all with the capability, or the majority of them with the capability of winning games. But as a collective, that cohesion just isn't there. And that reflects in a pattern: win, lose, win, lose, win, lose, win, lose, or win, win, lose, lose, win, win. That pattern is symptomatic of what's happening with the collective. Yeah, so for me, they're a better side than the Stormers. They definitely are a better side than the Stormers, and they looked at times. But like how they can't string it together is like, man.
It's strange. Yeah. So you make your prediction for the game against the Jags this weekend, and then I'll feed off that, because I'm not the one to trust right now.
There's an incentive for the Sharks, right? You want to get a playoff place here, and they've got to beat the Jags for that to happen. Sadly, I feel like the weight of that incentive is because of that, the way the collective is wired, is going to be too much for them to bear. I think they'll lose against the Jags this weekend, and they'll lose. I think they'll put up a fight because there's got to be some response to the incentive. So they'll put up a fight, but ultimately I think they'll lose by 5-7.
All right. Okay, I'm going to go against you.
Of course you are.
Because I think the Rebels will lose to the Highlanders. I think that'll leave the Sharks with enough incentive, and I think that'll garner a different reaction from them, one of having everything to play for, and I think it'll just get them over the line against the Jags by 5. That's where I'm going on that one, and let's move on.
I have to say, I have to admire your belief in this. And as a boy born in Cape Town, I have to take something from that in terms of my own belief of this Storm, is that no matter how dire the odds look, take inspiration from Craig and his unfailing dedication to the show.
And the problem was, I feared that there would be 2 reasons for you to have a go at me when the Jags went 19-0 up against the Bulls. But the team from Pretoria did really well to pull that one back and get a win that I predicted and you didn't.
Right.
Just to put that on record. But how do you see the Bulls Lions going? I think the Lions, a team as well who have the opportunity now to play for top spot in the South African Conference. So the Bulls did them a huge favour by beating the Jaguars.
Yeah.
And I think the Lions will have enough motivation to get a win over the Bulls.
Yeah, the Jags showed, a little bit of inexperience in the high felt there. They were just gassed in that. I would say at the end of the first half, but definitely in the final quarter, just completely gassed. They came out, the way they came out, I also thought that I was going to be able to nail it twice this week, but just the inexperience of playing on the high felt. Came out there, their legs were gone in the second half, and credit to the Bulls for pulling that back. To come back from that type of deficit says something about that team, so you've got to give them credit there. This week, I think the Lions are a better side all around. Also, the Bulls kind of nowhere at this point, not much of an incentive, and so I think the Lions will beat them to consolidate that spot in the playoffs, and they'll beat them comfortably. I think I'm going 10-12 in favour of the Lions.
All right, cool. I'm about the same with you. Cool. Thank you, Ryan. Praying for the Sharks.